So is there such a thing as an anti-duff chip shot? Well, I believe there is, and in this video I'm going to show you how to play it. Now, I've got a pitching wedge for this particular shot, but this would work with any club if you need to vary it depending on the situation in front of you. Let's go through the setup, the technique, and then we'll explain exactly why it's going to work. And at the end of the video, stay tuned, I've got a great skills game which can help you take it to the course. So the first thing I really want is to make sure that from that face on, the ball is pretty much directly under the middle of me. So that's a reference point for my buttons. You can see how the ball falls directly under that. I do want a tiny little bit of club shaft lean forwards, but not a huge amount. And I want to be taking my normal grip that I would do for a full swing. However, I like to go down the handle a little bit. There's a reason why that's going to help in a moment. You'll also notice that the feet are very, very close. Heels are one club head width apart, and my arms pretty relaxed. They're pretty straight, but they're certainly not locked. That tends to produce a lot of tension. So I want your arms to be nice and relaxed. And this is exactly how I'd like you to set up for the chip shot. Now, when we look from this down the line view, the key thing here, and this is in terms of the setup, possibly the most important thing that we do, is we stand in much closer to the golf ball. If I was hitting a full shot with this pitching wedge, I'd be stood here. And when I stand in, what has to happen is the club shaft has to get closer to vertical. As I walk in, you can see how that club shaft is now a lot closer to vertical. As that club gets closer to vertical, the top of the grip effectively gets higher. And that's why I would like to hold a little bit down the handle. If I hold towards the top of the handle, it sometimes feels like I have to put too much flex on my arm. So as I'm standing in closer, my hands go down the handle, and you can see how that probably looks incredibly close to many of you. So many golfers set up for a chip shot like they would for a full shot, and it can be really difficult from there. Now, the other thing that's really important, and it's quite difficult to see unless we show you a close-up, which we will do, is I'd love you to have the club face fractionally open. And I'm talking 1 to 2 degrees, so not a huge amount. But that just means rotating the toe a little bit away from the target, just to set the club face a little bit open. Once you can do that, you've then got everything in place, and that is your perfect setup to play the anti-duff chip shot. It's not over, you've got to actually hit the shot. And then for that, we really need to be thinking about the angle of approach. So how does the golf club move into the back of the ball? We absolutely want to get away from anything which is steep, anything where the golf club is approaching the ground at a high rate. That's never going to work. We want shallow. We want to feel like the golf club bruises or brushes the ground. And the real key thing to that is how much you use your body. I could absolutely hit a chip shot onto this green just using my hands and arms. No body movement at all. Might get an okay result, but it's not consistent. And when I use my hands and arms, I generally will get the club head working upwards a lot and therefore downwards a lot. That doesn't give me a lot of margin for error. What I'd love you to do is feel very much as if the golf club is being moved due to a pivot going back. By pivot, I mean a turn of the body, and then a turn of the body on the way through. And notice how even though that club is probably no more higher than my knee level, I'm rotated towards the target, and my trail heel has lifted a little bit from the ground. You'll also notice that the relationship I have between the club head, my arms and my body is the same at the follow through as it was at setup. If I simply rotated back to the ball and tipped over, it's the same. That's a great little exercise for you to see whether you did it correctly. Watch what happens if I get handsy and wristy. I turn back to the ball, drop down, and suddenly that club's nowhere near. So that's a great little exercise for you to feel like you're controlling this with the body. Now, why is that setup so important? Well, to understand that, we have to look at the golf club. We have to understand the sole of the golf club. The front edge here, this is what we call the leading edge, where the sole and the kind of grooves meet, this leading edge here. We need to not use that. If that starts to contact the ground, you're going to run into loads of issues. So we don't want to use the leading edge. We don't want to use the heel of the golf club, this part here. Again, that's going to give you lots of issues in terms of how your club interacts with the ground. The safest part of the club to interact with the ground would be the trailing edge, this back edge here, and the toe. So watch what happens when I raise the handle up, suddenly the toe sits down and the heel raises off the ground. So raising the handle means that we're contacting the ground with the toe of the club, not the heel. Perfect, that's what we want. It gives us a greater margin for error. And watch what happens when I slightly open the face. When I open the face, the leading edge raises up and the trailing edge gets lower. So by having that club face fractionally open and by having the club shaft more vertical, we effectively use the toe of the club and the trailing edge of the club. Now when those things hit the ground, the golf club just continues on its journey. It just carries on moving to wherever it was moving to. Watch what happens when I start to use the leading edge. So you can see how my hands are forward. I'm stood a bit further away. Now when I hit the ground, big difference. That club stopped immediately. So lots of golfers out there who are setting themselves up too far away from the ball, golf ball too far back, handle too far forward. They are effectively creating a situation where the golf club and its interaction with the ground are just not good. And what happens is those golfers who have that interaction with the ground and see that poor result suddenly have this idea of when the club hits the ground, the result is terrible, and it often is. So then they create a setup such as this, where the club would be going into the ground, and then through the motion, they're desperately trying to pull the club away from the ground, not hit the ground, because they've got that experience of when the club does hit the ground, it's a terrible result. So it's a real battle, a setup which promotes this steep approach with the wrong part of the club, and then a motion which is them trying to move away from the ground. With this anti-duff chip shot, by setting myself up in this way and understanding how the golf club moves, my intention is actually to hit the ground. Completely different. I want the club to hit the ground because that's how I get that consistent strike. So on these little practice swings, I'm very simply rotating my body and I'm just getting the golf club to land exactly where the golf ball is. So let me hit one. I'm standing much closer, raise the handle, and my goal here is simply to get the golf club to contact the ground where the ball is. And it's a little bit short, but a pretty good result. I contacted the ground, I got a nice little flight and it rolled up. It's exactly what I'm trying to do. Got some fans over there, I'm not too sure whether they're happy with it or not happy with it, they're being pretty loud. But I can tell you that my whole intention was different because I'd created a setup and a motion where the club was going to interact with the ground in the correct way. That's so, so important. Let me hit another one for you and I can show you that. Setup, handle high, face slightly open, contact the ground. And slightly right to target, but again, a pretty good chip and I'd be fairly happy with that. So the setup and the motion are absolutely key. Now let me show you a little skill exercise which can help you take it to the golf course. So if we were to play golf indoors on a mat in a controlled environment, that is all you'd need. That information there is all you need to chip the golf ball, but we don't. We play outside where we've got slopes and we've got humps and we've got undulations and we've got uneven lies and we've got the real world, the real golf course. So here's a great little exercise that you can do to train yourself for that. This golf ball here is the one that I would hit exactly as we've just described, that ball position, that technique, that setup, everything that we just went through. But you'll notice that I've got a golf ball here, which if I set up is slightly further back in my stance. And I've got a golf ball here, which if I shuffle forward would be slightly further forward in my stance. What I'd love you to do is set this up, hit that middle ball, then hit the one here, and then hit the one here. Now those golf balls are forward in my stance and back in my stance, which is for me not necessarily how I'd get you to play the shot. But what it's doing is it's teaching you how to adapt. It's teaching you that we're not necessarily trying to get the golf club to land in between your heels. We're trying to get the golf club to land wherever the ball is. Because you might be in a situation where the ball is below your feet, or the ball is above your feet, or you're leaning slightly. We have to learn how to overcome those situations. As I say, golf isn't a controlled environment. So this one is the one we've just gone through. Should be the easiest one to play. It's going to be a little bit short, I think, but not a bad result. So all I would do is I'd shuffle back and play this one. So that certainly feels as if it's a little bit further back in my stance. Ball actually comes out a little bit lower, which is what we'd expect from there, and there was a little bit more ground contact. And then all I do is shuffle forwards, and this one is now much more forward in my stance, so I should get a slightly higher ball flight, which you can see there. And again, a little bit short. So I'm hitting shots there that I might not necessarily want to do in a perfect world, but it's teaching me that a chip shot is not about the club landing on the ground in between my heels. It's about the club landing on the ground wherever that ball is. You know, like I said, that ball might be somewhere different to you based on the situation that you're in. That's a great little way to do that. So you can work on your technique, and then that is what I call a transition drill, taking those new skills and applying them to the golf course. Really hope that helps. With any luck, you'll never hit a duff chip again.